Okay, welcome everybody. We knew that it was going to be a small group tonight, and sure enough, it is very small. So we're glad you're here, though, and inside where it's nice and warm. And we're going to wander through the lesson here in the book. There were some additional things that I wanted to talk about that were not covered in here, and some of the things. If we have time at the end, that'll be great, and that'll be a little bonus in there to go through. So, okay, so we're on the lesson dealing with respect as another part of the Christian character we're trying to engage in our lives and pick up as part of that. So as we it's not forwarding again. He's doing it down there. Let's see. There we go. All right, now it's working. Okay, thank you. So, in talking about what does it mean to show respect? He uses the term showing respect. Respect is not a thing. It's something that you present or you show in your character and your attitude and your actions. So what does it mean to show respect? What in our own words? What? Okay, well there you go. There's. Okay, so honor and esteem or some. There's a lot of synonyms we could use, right, for respect, and honor and esteem are a couple of those that Roger uses in there in kind of his definition. But there's some things. Well, let me ask you this question: What are the two ways in which this particular characteristic, this respect, must be taught for it to be effectively learned by somebody? Because respect is something that is a high level, very taught characteristic. It's not something that, babies just learn just by being born. So what are a couple of things we need to think about when we're going to try to teach somebody respect and how to show respect? Go ahead, Francis. Okay, so examples, and so we could call those deeds, things that you do. How else do you teach people? Besides doing stuff? By words, okay, yeah. So by words and deeds are the things that people learn about things like respect. And many of the spiritual characteristics that we talked about, if we don't use these things effectively, we're going to have problems with that. Now, it kind of takes us back to the Old Testament in Deuteronomy. This is something that I think all of us have gone through from time to time, but I wanted us to take a look at this just to get us started in the discussion about respect this evening. In Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Now, all these words that I've got underlined up here, look at the first one that is most important is that word H-E-A-R-T. And when we're talking about the heart, aren't we talking about the character and the individual, who you are? And it all starts with that, doesn't it? When we're learning anything or we're going to do anything that's spiritual, it starts with the heart. It's who we are. And then look at all those other words that are underlined. Look how many different ways that the message is sent to the learner in there. the teaching, the talking, as you're going about. Does any of that say, oh, I'm just gonna take about a half hour a day and sit down and get them around the table, and we're gonna talk about, and then pick the subject? Is that the way God is approaching it? How much of your life is identified up there in just those words? Walking and talking, it's between your eyes. It's with your hands, the things you do, the walking around. The idea of it's in your house as well as out of your house. All of those ideas are all associated with this. So it's a wonderful way to look at it. So what are two things that are absolutely necessary if we're going to show true respect? Two different things that you need to be able to show true respect. And if you are the one who the respect is being shown to, you will be able to tell if the person is just full of hot air or they're really showing respect. What's one of the ways that you can tell when somebody's kind of pulling the wool over your eyes, when they're buttering you up for something? Usually shows up right away. God was very upset at Israel because they did not do this as part of their worship to him. As a matter of fact, this thing was just awful. And as a result, he condemned them for it. What is it? It starts with an A, and it says a lot about who we are. It shows up right away. Attitude. Can you go up and show respect to somebody with a lousy attitude? Are they going to pick up? Do you pick up on things like that? Sure you do. If it's your kids, you're asking them to do something and they're coming back at you with an attitude, you can tell, can't you? Moms, right? Okay? Attitude is one of the things necessary to show true respect. What's the other one? We talked about it already. Francis said words and deeds. That's right. So it's our attitudes and our action that make the difference as to whether or not we're showing true respect. So we've got to think about that. God knows our hearts. And so as a result, he can pick up on all this stuff. But sometimes we can pick up on it ourselves. So, to whom should we show respect? Okay, so to all people. That's right. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17 is used in the lesson book here, where it says, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, again used in the lesson. Submitting to one another in the fear of God. And so all of this is basically everybody, God, since we're all made in the image of God, we're all due the respect due as should be duly given to something that God created. So that's in there. But who else do we concentrate on giving respect to? Besides just all people in general, who do we pay the most attention to, and who does the world honestly pay attention to when it comes to giving respect? Okay, God, yes. God falls into this category, actually. If we think of a whole group of people, let's say the military. The military has a way of doing this and letting you know about this, and comes in the form of like little badges that people wear called rank. And what's that? Yeah, those above you. That's right. All those that are in authority over you. And this is kind of interesting because one of the things about this is that it's a situational thing. This is something where you really have to go through life paying attention to what's going around. Who's around you, the culture in the area. Over in Korea, a lot of you know I like to watch Korean TV, Korean dramas and things like that. But they have their whole language is built around whether or not I'm a day older than you or not. And if I'm a day older than you, you have to use honorifics to me. And unless I give you permission to drop that, and then we can be buddies. But then they still have other words, a whole system of words that all they do is line you up in a level of authority. Okay? So we really have to pay attention to those kinds of things if we're going to be a courteous, and courtesy is something, that's why I said it takes an awareness of others around you to be able to do this. Somebody who, and this tradition is mainly gone by the wayside, but when an elderly person would walk into the room, you know, when I was growing up, if you were younger, you stood up in respect for them until they were seated, and then you sat down, if you were taught properly. If you weren't, you could tell who was not taught properly, okay, during that. Those are the courtesies we're talking about. So, what part, if you're thinking about this, what part do priorities then play in deciding what actions we're going to take when it comes to showing respect to somebody? What kind of priorities are going to have to come into play here? And let's say well, let's go back to the first century. And you had Christians who were supposed to do X because the government said that X was what you had needed to do, but X would go against God's law, which was Y over here. And now you had a decision to make. Am I going to do X or am I going to do Y? And what would make the difference as to whether or not which one you were going to do? It's going to be which has the higher priority for you, right? Okay? So in every decision you make, who has the highest priority? What has the highest priority in your life? The answer should be, if you're a Christian, yeah, it should be for everybody, but yeah, God's going to, His law is what's going to take precedence. We could see this in action in Acts chapter 5, when after Peter had been in trouble there, and he'd just gotten out of jail, and so he's before the Sanhedrin again, and they're telling him, I told you not to preach on that Jesus guy. Told you not to do it. Beat you. Trying to convince you not to do it. Don't do it. I'm telling you, don't do it. And here's what Peter said. Peter and the apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. That's a priority right there. Okay? So, priorities have a lot to do with showing respect. You show respect to those things that that are higher than you, that are at a higher level than you, because you are humbling yourself and raising them up. Now, we've talked about that in many different aspects before. Jesse's had many sermons on it, and we talk about it almost every week, and that's because it's so fundamental to being a Christian, because it's all about love. And love does what? What is love all about? What's that? Yeah, humbling yourself and giving. It's all about giving to somebody else and putting them before you and all that. So yeah, very, very much so. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of respect in action in these three institutions. And in our lesson, these are the three that they talk about, and then they add one at the end, which we'll talk about, which is also very important. But these three specific institutions established by God, he designed within the creation how we should act within these three institutions. So we're going to talk about that for a while. So the first one, respect within the family. We're talking about a family starts with a husband and a wife. Okay, you can't have a family without the husband and the wife. So you got the husband and the wife, and eventually, if they're blessed, the husband and the wife have children. And so we have husband, wife, and children. Okay, so each of those have a very specific roles and things. And so you would expect that there would be an organizational hierarchy within the family, and you would be right. And so let's look at this question. How do each of these show respect for the other ones? Okay, so let's start with, and you can go to Ephesians chapter 5 right now. You can go ahead and turn over there. Ephesians chapter 5, and the first one we're going to talk about is the guys. Ephesians chapter 5, and how should the husband show respect to his wife? Rhoda, you look like you have something to say there. What's that? I'm still, I couldn't quite hear you. Through, how does the husband show respect to his wife?
Shelter and clothing.
Food, shelter, and clothing. Okay, now I got you. My ears are going too. Being the provider on that. Okay, very good. What other things does the Ephesians chapter 5? And by the way, of course, Ephesians chapter 5 is not the only place that covers these, but this gets us kind of started on the topic. So how else does the husband show respect to his wife? How does he treat her? He provides for her. Well, he comes home grumbling. Yeah, gotta bring home food for you. Well, gotta go out and work, and you're sitting home all day not doing anything. And of course, that's an attitude, isn't it? That shows something, but it doesn't show respect for sure. So how does God say the husband should show respect to his wife in regards to his wife and their relationship? Okay, there we go. Yeah, loving her as Christ loved the church. And so that brings up a whole big picture. It brings up the idea of sacrifice. All of those things are associated with that. And there's many, many layered ways of looking at that, but it means a lot. And there's a lot to do for the husband to show respect for his wife. Okay? So how about the wife for the husband? Same chapter, interspersing the verses in there. How does the wife show respect? Because it specifically says in verse 33 in chapter 5, the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. So it's like the last thing said on the topic. What does the wife do to show respect to her husband? Being in subjection. Okay, so practical example. Well, give me a practical example of how you would show that to your husband.
Makes a decision.
Okay, so there's an agreement that is made, and you help carry it out as part of that idea. So Yeah, so in other words, there's a teamwork that's going on between the husband and the wife. The husband is doing the sacrificial things that are out there for his wife, so his wife knows that he cares, all of that. Francis?
Like you're saying there,
Mhm.
a husband is to love his wife, the wife is to respect her husband. Well, any husband that loves his wife, the wife will respect him. Any wife that respects her husband, he will love her for that.
So there's a chicken or an egg thing there, and if you get into the chicken or the egg argument, like in reverse, like, well, if you would just respect me more, then I'd love you more, and but if you loved me more, then I'd respect you. So it works backwards also, for a disastrous relationship, or it works forward in the I'm going to proactively do what I'm supposed to do and show that, and then as a result, you get a reaction from that. Francis?
If you're showing yourself humble, then you're not showing yourself to be, it's all about me, then you're going to honor, and you're going to respect, and you're going to love, because you're not self. It's not
Yeah.
for you, it's for the
Very, very good, yeah. And you see what Francis is talking about there, there are two sides to those coins, aren't there? And one is, that's why this lesson is called Developing Positive Christian Character. There's a positive side to the development, and then there's a negative side. And we want to keep on the positive side here. So how about the children? In chapter 6 of Ephesians, how are the children then to show their respect for their parents? It's fairly simple for them. Not much complicated here. By obeying their parents, that's right. The parents love the children, and so the children hopefully will then see that. But even if there's not love there, what should the children do? Obey their parents. That's right, because that's the place where everything starts. So then how about, respect for the parents, from the parents for the children? How do parents show respect for their children? We don't think about that one that often. Okay, so it's a very proactive thing, isn't it, that they're doing? They're bringing that all up. And do students get frustrated once in a while if they're having a hard time learning something? Yeah. Are children, in essence, students of life? Yeah. So they get frustrated from time to time. And the problem comes in, not that when they get frustrated, but the source of the frustration. And God doesn't want us as parents to be the source of the frustration. We're supposed to be the ones that are the encouragement to do better. So it's one of these things. And you can see again the flip side of each of these. So what is the common characteristic that is common to all of this? Not only within the family, but in all of these institutions that God showed up, that he gave us. Respect both ways, yes. Well, what's the motivator that's supposed to be the driving force in all of our actions? And it was Jesus' motivation in coming to this earth to die for us. Love, yes, that's right. That's right. Love is the thing that ties it all together, because it's the motivation there. Love for God. Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31. We see there. Let's go ahead and open that one up. Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31. And hey, Mark, could you do Mark chapter 12, 29 through 31?
most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these.
Okay, so love of God is going to set up everything. It sets up your priorities out there, okay? So you're going to go to God's word for advice. You're going to go to God in prayer. You're going to go where godly people are. It becomes the top priority. And if you get that right, then you're going to have a good chance of getting all the respect priorities right also, and working with those. But then the second one is like unto it, and that is to love each other. And again, John 13, 34 and 35. Let's see. Hey, Tim, could you get this one? John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35.
A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
Okay. And so, again, now, remember, this is the common, love is the common characteristic in all of the actions that we take in all of these different institutions, the way we deal with respecting somebody else, putting them in a higher position and showing them the respect that they're due, all comes out of the motivation of love first. That sacrificial love where you're going to place them above you and do whatever is best for them. That's the driving factor for all of this. Okay, so we talked about the family. A lot of interactions going there. The family is the staging ground, the learning place for all of everything else that's there. So it couldn't be more important. The second one is the respect for the governing authorities. Now, I've got Romans 13, 1 through 7, and 1 Peter 2, verses 13 through 17 up here. We've talked about these before, and it's always been interesting in trying to make the application to these particular ones. But let's take a look at Romans 13, verses 1 through 7. Andy, could you read that one for us? Romans 13, 1 through 7. And let's see. Lena, could you get 1 Peter 2, 13 through 17? Yep, go ahead, Andy.
Romans 13, 1 through 7. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists the ordinances of God, and those who resist will bring judgment upon themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute. Watch on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, custom to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor.
Okay, go ahead, Lena.
Okay, 1 Peter 2,
Chapter 2.
13, 17.
Yep.
Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governor, as to those who are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
Okay. So, in looking at this idea of how do we have a God-made institution that is run by men and is very imperfect. And yet we are to respect that. So we get some hints in here as to a direction that God wants us to go in here. Let's take a look at a couple of other things too to add in here before we come up to a final answer. So let's take a look at, see if Jesus' example here can help us in Mark 12, verse 17. And this is where they were having the big discussion about, should I pay taxes or not to Caesar? And trying to trap Jesus. And in Mark 12, 17, it says, and Jesus answered and said to them, after asking them, whose picture is on that coin right there? And they said, well, that's Caesar's. And Jesus answered and said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Okay, so if we put all of that together with the previous two scriptures that we've been talking about, what is the priority if we're going to show proper respect to this God-given institution of government? What is the priority that we first have to take a look at? What should be the priority? Because we're talking about obedience. We're going to obey somebody. Okay, yeah. I mean, the first thing we have to look at is what they're telling me to do. Is that going to violate a law that is of a higher priority? And the higher priority law takes priority over that. Now, the consequences of that you're going to have to look at also, but that's the place where you start. And so, the priority first. And then the question, how and why would you show respect to governing authorities? First, the how. How would you show respect to governing authorities? Whoa. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
I was thinking about, you remember whenever Paul got slapped in Acts 23?
Uh-huh.
Can I read that real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
In Acts 23, and starting in verse 1, it says, then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? And those who stood by said, do you reveal God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. And that's Exodus 22:28.
Right. Very, very good. That is a great example of Paul going through the process there, thinking at first that he violated God's law, so I'm not going to violate God's law, I'm going to do God's law. And then finding out that here's the respect, and then the law wasn't, and so he's gone through that whole process there. So the how continues to come back to the priority. Once you established what the priority is, then it becomes fairly simple. The question then moves from how to why. Why would you do this? Why would you obey God? Why would you obey these? What might be, well, look at the first century. The way the Roman government was set up, and the government there in the Jerusalem area and around that area, very corrupt.
Well, the problem is that it's an institution that God had made, and so
Cookeville. There you go. And so, I won't even get to that one yet. So, so yeah, it gets back to that. If you're not violating, no matter how crazy it might sound to do it, the respect is due to the institution, not necessarily to the person that is asking you to do this. May be the most corrupt person you've ever seen, but again, you have an institution there that is represented there, and it comes back on you and whoever you are representing as to whether or not you're going to get bad publicity for the group, yourself in trouble, and all of that.
He said there, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
As long as you're doing the thing that's right.
As long as you're doing,
Yeah,
yes.
then there's no problem.
Yes, and that's, and remember, it's the whole idea of government is a theoretical way of dealing with, again, generally true ideas. The government, if it's doing what it should be doing, is going to go to God for advice. It's going to be doing godly things with its power. And then 6 minutes. First bell at 4:00. Yeah, so still 1 minute. All right. Okay, so let's go to respect within the church. And in the book here, we've got 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 12 to 13, and in 1 Timothy 5, verses 17 and 18. And in both cases, they're talking about the church leadership, and specifically the elders, those that have been put in charge within this God-given institution. And so the question comes out, why is it important to respect the elders of the church? And I bring up 1 Samuel 24, verse 6 as an example, for instance. And here you have David in a situation where he is in a position where he can kill King Saul. Terrible king. Would have been better off without him, right? I mean, and he could have made all kinds of excuses. As a matter of fact, his men thought he was nuts that he's not in there taking, because don't you know Saul would kill you if he had the chance? But look what he says. And he says this to his men. The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. And so here again, the situation is the fact that there is an organization which is God has designed called the church, and within the church, that church is organized with elders, and if they are necessary, deacons, and then all the members, and they are supposed to work together in a harmonious way of doing it. This is God's plan. So we need to honor God's plan, and that's the thing. Now, if the leadership is going against God's law, there's a whole remedy for that to get that corrected. But it starts with us with the idea of respect. So then you have this this term double honor. What does double honor refer to? When we're talking about elders. Elders should be given double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. So besides being leaders in the congregation, we have overseer, right? Bishop. We have pastor, shepherd. These are just different aspects of what an elder does, okay? So one of the things that they do besides, in the qualifications for an elder, besides being a leader, is they're apt to teach. They're able to teach. So there are elders in the, Peter's a good example, where he was a teacher and an elder. We have an elder here who's a preacher and an elder at the same time. All of those things are part of it. But the double honor is more associated with this, and that is, throughout the Bible, this idea of a double portion is always given to the leadership. Firstborn, examples of the firstborn son, double honor, double portions. This idea of doubling for leadership is all part of God's plan. And what it does is it recognizes the extra responsibility that is laid upon these people. And now remember, who's responsible for our souls here in this congregation? The elders are going to have to be, they're going to be accountable for every one of our souls, every one of them. So if they do an honorable job and a good job, they are due double honor for that. So, how should we handle a disagreement with the elders? I'm going to run through this pretty quick because we only have a minute or so. But in 1 Timothy, it deals with the idea of except for 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay, and the question is this handled differently than problems with any other brother or sister in Christ? Are the elders a special case, or do we handle them sort of like everybody else? The answer really is no and yes. The no part deals with, and we can go here, what is our obligation to a brother who is sinning? For instance, what are we supposed to do for a brother who is sinning? We're supposed to go ahead and be the one that tries to help him out of that situation, right? And then, of course, the general principle is Matthew chapter 18, where you go through the process and everything. That process is the same whether or not it's an elder or anybody else in the church. But the issue is with the elders is that there's a lot more at stake from the standpoint because of the influence that the elders have on the congregation. So as we look through here, if you look in James about the teachers, you're supposed to be a little bit cautious about teaching because it's so it's so dangerous. You could teach something wrong. That's part of the thing. So they're held to a stricter judgment, and same thing with the elders taking care of the soul. So the degree of damage with an elder going awry is proportional to the power of the influence of there. And that's why with elders, even though you use the same process, there's a lot more at stake. Okay? All right, so there you go. This is the one we weren't going to get to. And so you guys that are the elderly, we'll just have to take our